Hello, welcome to the channel Why Stories. Enjoy watching.
Every time when Ana Collado went to work, she literally pleaded with herself to be patient, not understanding how long this nightmare could last. She was happy to work as a nurse in one of the surgical departments of the city hospital until recently. She knew what she wanted to be when she grew up since she was a child. After graduating from medical school, she immediately plunged into her new profession. She worked day and night, accepting all schedules and shifts. She did it not because of money, even though she really needed the money. She did it for the pleasure of doing what she loved. Patients of the department always went straight to her for an injection or an IV, saying that she did the procedures like a magician. It all seemed perfect, but Ana, from the days she spent at the orphanage where she grew up, had no tolerance for injustice and lies. The fact was that the head of the department where she worked regularly deceived patients. He made unsubstantiated conclusions and prescriptions, and his goal was to get as much money out of the patients as possible. Ana, who came from a poor, remote village, saw that many people borrowed money to pay for an appointment with the local medical genius. And one day she heard the head of the department, Dr. Crispincella, telling a horrible prognosis to a fragile girl who had come with her elderly mother, and she decided to restore justice. Ana had graduated from medical school. She was one of the best students, and her professors predicted a successful career for her. The girl was still young, but already had an excellent understanding of such matters and knew that in some situations it was possible to prescribe a much more affordable treatment, and the disease itself was not as dangerous as Dr. Crispincella said it was. She heard how that girl tried to comfort her mother, barely able to hold back her tears. "Everything will be okay, Mommy. We will find the money and you will recover." In the hospital hallway, the patient's daughter made numerous phone calls to different people, and most likely the calls did not lead to the desired result. The girl sat down on the bench and cried. This was the last straw in the nurse's patience. She put herself in this poor girl's shoes at that moment. Ana waited for the doctor to come out, approached him, and started in a quiet but firm voice. "Crispincella, you know that this family obviously has no money for the treatment you have prescribed. Besides, she doesn't even need that kind of treatment." For a moment he was confused by this insolence, but then he literally hissed back, "Nurse Collado, what the hell are you doing? Who do you think you are? Go back to your workplace and do your job." From that day on, a living hell began for Ana at the hospital. She went to work dreading and not knowing what else Crispincella would scold her for. He felt no shame insulting her in front of the staff and the patients, and now he was scolding her for every trifle. If he could not find something to criticize in her work, he was sure to say something about the appearance of a nurse. The fact is that Ana was tall and overweight, but very charismatic. She never really cared about her appearance. The girl was heavier than her peers from birth, and she was used to insults and taunts, but it all remained in childhood. And now it became a reason for mockery from her colleagues, which is much more offensive. One morning, when Ana had just arrived at work, Crispincella walked in. He was in a great mood, said hello to the nurses, defiantly turned his back to Ana, and then turned to her casually. "Collado, I think you should lose some weight. And your knowledge is not enough to work in our department as a nurse. So I decided that it would be better and more useful for you to work as a cleaner. You'll like that job better because you're just a country bumpkin." He turned around on his way to the door and said angrily to Ana, "I hope the floors and windows will be shiny and you will change the patient's diapers regularly. Now you'll be busy doing physical work all day long, and you won't have time to think about nonsense or stick your nose in my business." He smiled and winked at Lilia, the local beauty, and headed for the exit. At this moment Ana wanted to run away, hide, or simply burst into tears, but she knew that no one would feel sorry for her or comfort her, and she was not going to show weakness in front of this tyrant. All staff from the first minutes of conflict between the country girl and the famous surgeon obviously took his side. They only laughed at the nurse, saying, "You shouldn't have argued with him. You should have done your job quietly and stayed out of his way." They hired a poor orphan from the village to one of the best hospitals in the city, and she decided to fight for the truth, her colleagues said. You should be thankful that they hired you to a famous hospital with your appearance and orphanage background. Lilia told her off. Lilia was not from a rich family, but her mother and grandmother worked 3 jobs so that the girl did not lack anything. But the beautiful girl was not interested in this, because she spent her salary in restaurants and discos, not thinking about what she would live on later. Lilia was always surrounded by crowds of suitors, and every other patient gave her flowers and sweets. The management also treated her very leniently. They would have fired anyone else for the violations that Lilia made, but they could only smile and say to her, "Lilia, pull yourself together and try to work better from now on." In response, she would lower her eyes, smile shyly and say, "I don't know how it happened. I promise it will never happen again." How could this spoiled beauty understand Ana, who had no one to take care of her? The girl could only count on herself for years. And now, she decided to be patient, no matter what it took. She needed something to live on. Now, when she was cleaning the wards or mopping the floors in the hospital hallway, she often thought back to the past, unable to understand why life was giving her such an ordeal. Ana had never met her parents, but her mother's picture was always next to her bed in her grandmother Maria's house, and she also had a very small picture that she always took with her. However, it was all that was left of her mother. When she was a child, her grandmother Maria rarely mentioned, "Stupid doctors killed her." If we had lived in the city, perhaps the city doctors would have helped her, but our village's inexperienced doctors killed my young girl. She didn't even live long enough. Sometimes she would go on, "I told her she didn't need a baby, but your mother was stubborn, and if she made up her mind, there was no chance to convince her otherwise." Ana came to only one conclusion from such lamentations: she was definitely an unwanted child. Her mother died shortly after giving birth, according to her grandmother's words. They lived in a remote village, where the only paramedic was rarely sober. Grandma Maria grumbled angrily. Your mother, Ramona, decided to become a city girl. She ran away to start a new life, and when she got pregnant by some unknown man, she decided to come back to me. At such rare moments, Granny wept silently, wiping away a tear with the corner of her handkerchief, but if Ana tried to ask something about her father, Granny would immediately change the subject. Your father is like a wind in the field, like a hurricane in the sky. You cannot find or catch him. Go, and never ask about him again. The girl knew that her grandmother would not say anything else. On such days, Grandma would walk around frowning, muttering something to herself, probably scolding the unknown father. Grandma Maria was strict but fair. Ana knew that she loved her dearly and felt compassion for her, but she tried not to show it. They lived poorly, but the girl always had everything she needed. Her allowance was low, and her grandmother worked almost until her last day, cleaning floors in the local store and at the post office. Neighbors helped out in any way they could by bringing them old children's clothes and school supplies. Grandma gladly took all the items and thanked them. And in the evening, Maria would go out on the terrace and carefully inspect all the items, selecting only those that were still in good condition. She washed and ironed them, and in the morning Ana had beautiful outfits, almost as good as new. Why are you standing there? Did you fall asleep? The shout of the head nurse brought Ana back from the past. If Crispincella sees you idling around here, you won't get a bonus for sure, she added and walked off down the hall. Ana sighed and thought that she could forget about the bonus now. The vicious Crispincella would do his best to make sure she didn't get it. She sighed, changed the water in the bucket, and went to clean the hallway. Ana mopped the floors at the hospital, but mentally she was far away from that day again. She was in the past, filled with sad memories of changes and betrayal. She often remembered one of the worst days of her life, the day her grandmother died. She came home from school and immediately sensed something was wrong. There was no smell of food in the house, and her grandmother made no noise with the dishes. She always made lunch for her granddaughter when she came home, but that day she saw her lying on the floor by the door with her eyes open as if staring at the ceiling. Ana first tried to call out quietly, "Grandma, why are you lying on the floor?" Ana was only 12, but she realized that something irreparable had happened. She rushed headlong to the neighbors, crying. It was either the tears or the rain, or most likely both, that blinded her eyes, and the girl almost fell several times, but tried to run as fast as possible. She was scared in her heart, thinking that the faster she ran, the faster they would help her grandmother. After crossing the neighbor's threshold, Ana started waving toward her house and whispering, "Grandma, Grandma's there." She sat down on the floor, exhausted, and then it was like a nightmare. Almost all the neighbors came to their house. Everyone was sobbing, stroking her head, and wailing, "You are an orphan now. How will you survive? 'Cause no one needs you now." She spent that night at her neighbor's house. And they whispered and talked for a long time. The women cried, and the men went outside to smoke every now and then. Immediately after her grandmother's funeral, Ana went to an orphanage in the nearest city. Ana wasn't very sociable before, and now she has become completely introverted and didn't talk to anyone. Most of the time she was sitting in a corner with a book or at the door of a medical office. Ana would spend hours studying posters and pamphlets on medical topics. A young doctor who worked at the orphanage noticed the plump, quiet girl. One day she approached the girl, who was studying the medical poster again, and asked, "Are you interested? Would you like to see what's in the office?" Ana nodded quickly without hesitation, as if afraid that Angeles Carrasco would change her mind. Holding her breath, the girl stared at the medical tools. And from that day on she became a frequent visitor at the Temple of Medicine. She felt that the lives of all the residents of the orphanage depended on Angeles. She even thought that if this woman had been near her grandmother and mother at the right moment, they would definitely have been alive, because anyone who came to this office with any kind of pain always came out with a smile on their face. The pain was always left behind that door, and that was probably one of those moments when she decided to become a medical professional and help people. She wanted to become like a fairy, like a magician, able to cure any disease. Ana diligently prepared for medical school, and when the time came she easily enrolled at the medical school. Angeles was always there to help and support her. By this time Ana had drastically changed from a chubby little girl to a tall beauty with long hair. She was very different from her peers, who only talked about boys and diets. Ana was not interested in that at all, so the orphanage beauties were surprised when a handsome young guy was waiting for this fat, ugly girl, as they used to call her since childhood, at the gate of the orphanage. It became clear why the girl's eyes had recently begun to radiate some magical sparkle. She looked prettier, and despite her weight, she looked so airy and floating. It turned out that the girl had fallen in love, and the feelings were mutual. They met by chance. Ana liked to take walks in the park near the lake, which was quite close to the orphanage. When the weather was good, she would sit on the shore, losing track of time. When the weather was bad, she would just wander through the alleys, dreaming about the future or remembering the past. Once, on one of those days, she was almost run over by a guy on a bicycle, either because she was clumsy or because he failed to control his bicycle while turning. They both apologized awkwardly at first, then laughed, and the young man offered, "As a gentleman, I am obliged to apologize. The weather is so cold, so I invite you to have a cup of hot coffee and try a delicious dessert. There's a cafe not far from here. They offer wonderful desserts." Obviously, she said yes. They sipped incredibly good coffee, as she thought at the time, and talked about books. Then, they wandered around for a long time, talking about everything. They did not want to leave and agreed to meet there the next day. Then every day Bernardo, that was the young man's name, would stand at the door of the orphanage waiting for his beautiful girlfriend. The roommates whispered in bewilderment, what could this handsome city boy find in a simple country girl? But each time they met, it was as if the couple did not notice anyone or anything around them. They enjoyed every day, every moment they spent together. After the orphanage, Ana easily enrolled in medical school. Bernardo was the first and perhaps the only one who congratulated her that day. He greeted her with a huge bouquet, kissed her, and said, "I did not doubt that you would pass the exams with honors." He always supported Ana in everything and became the closest and dearest person to her during this time. She was so happy, and it seemed to her that everything between them was perfect, so she never wondered why Bernardo did not introduce her to his parents. The lovebirds had already dreamed that Bernardo would return from the army and they would get married. When Ana saw her beloved off to the army, she cried and whispered, "It's okay, I will wait for you, and the separation will only make our love stronger. Right, my love?" Bernardo wiped the tears from her cheeks and whispered in her ear with a smile, "Sure, my dear. Time will fly by unnoticed, and we will be together again." When Bernardo left for the army, the only salvation for the girl was his letters. She waited for every letter from her beloved. In the beginning, they were frequent, and there were many tender words, but with each month, the letters began to come less and less often, and became cold, not romantic, but rather friendly. Ana didn't think about it. She was counting the days until Bernardo's return, but it happened not in the way she had imagined. One day, as Ana was returning from the university campus to the dormitory where she lived, a watchman called out to her, "That soldier came here. He left a letter, but he didn't wait for you. Here, he asked me to give it to you." The girl immediately recognized the handwriting of her beloved. She had kept all his letters in a box, along with the white shoes she had bought for her wedding. She often imagined herself dancing with Bernardo in those shoes. Ana looked again at the envelope. There was not a single stamp on it. The letter was definitely delivered by Bernardo, not by the mailman. She smiled happily because that meant that Bernie had arrived. She thought for a moment that her lover was in a hurry and wanted to surprise her. She was sure that the envelope indicated the place and time of their long-awaited meeting. Ana ran to her room, forgetting to thank the watchman for the letter, and plunged onto the bed to open the envelope. The first lines of the envelope seemed somewhat indifferent and cold to her. "Hello, Ana. I'm sorry, but it's easier for me to write than to say it in person. Yes, I am a coward." The girl kept rereading the first lines and could not believe that it was written by her beloved Bernie. There was none of the usual tender words. Something inside stretched treacherously, like a guitar string, and Ana became afraid. What if this string will break now, and she will die? She pulled herself together and decided to finish reading it. She was reading Bernardo's confession, as if in a nightmare, and the worst nightmare of her life. Bernardo wrote that his parents wouldn't let them be together anyway, that they had made their decision long ago, and he would marry his former classmate. The girl's father is his father's business partner, and Bernardo's mother is allegedly very ill, and her heart couldn't take it if he went against their will. "It's better for both of us. I'm sorry, you will definitely be happy." These were the last words of her beloved. After reading the letter to the end, Ana sat for a long time, staring out the dark window. It rained heavily that night as if to mourn her love. If someone had looked at the girl at that moment, they might have mistaken her for a stone statue. She seemed a gray, lifeless creature in the darkness of the room. That night, it was as if the girl's life was divided into before and after. She experienced similar feelings on the day of her grandmother's funeral, only then it was death and it was difficult to blame someone, and now, in her adult life, the betrayal of a loved one was a border between the past and the future. For a while, Ana lived without understanding what was going on. She went to classes just out of habit, came back, went to bed, got up again, and went to study. The good thing was that those were the last days at the medical school. There were still some organizational matters, to return the books to the library and get ready to leave the dormitory room. When everything was done, Ana decided to run away from the past, erase her memories, and start a new life. As the best student, she was offered a job at the local hospital, but she decided to go as far away as possible to the big city and disappear in that city forever. Years later, Ana often recalled tearing into little shreds the letters from the army that were so dear to her heart, and the tears wouldn't stop flowing down her cheeks. The girl well remembered leaving the dormitory. She worked very hard to buy those white shoes for the wedding, but she put them on the table that day and put a note beside them, "May these shoes bring good luck to the new student." She thought she was getting rid of everything that bound her to the past and headed off to meet the unknown future. On the train, Ana looked at the scenery flashing outside the window and was sure that she would never be able to love or be loved again. And when she found herself at the big, beautiful train station of a huge metropolis, Ana was confused for the first moment, because it was a completely different world. The city reminded her of an anthill. Everyone was in a hurry, no one said hello to anyone, and people were completely unlike the inhabitants of her village, who knew each other by name. Everyone in the city was busy with their own thoughts, living their own lives. Ana, finding herself in this new hectic world, realized that now she had to settle down and start living again and learn a lot of new things. The girl could not find a place to live for a long time. Fortunately, during her studies, she worked part-time at a hospital and saved up money for her wedding. After everything that had happened, Ana decided to use the money she saved for new purposes and a new life. When she left for the city, she thought this stash would be enough for a long time, but it turned out that she couldn't even rent a decent place with this money. When she completely lost hope, she came across a small piece of paper on a bulletin board near the train station. Ana was happy with the price the landlady had quoted on the phone. It was almost all of her money, but she had no choice. She found the address on a map of the city. It was very far from the train station, almost on the outskirts. A small room in an old two-bedroom apartment on the first floor. All the furniture was a nightstand, a bed, and a small table. There wasn't even a wardrobe, and there was no place for it. There were a few coat hooks nailed behind the door. The room looked very poor, but clean. There were pretty geraniums on the little windowsill and old, but clean white curtains. The landlady was a skinny old lady with kind eyes. Alfonsina Toribio immediately said, as if apologizing, "I'm sorry, sweetie. This is my late son's room. He drank a lot, so he sold all the furniture to find money for alcohol." It turned out that her son had died 3 years ago, and she didn't want to let anyone in that room, but she needed the money. She had been retired for a long time, so she was short of money. Suddenly, before Ana even had time to turn around, Alfonsina had already brought an old mirror from her room. "How can a beauty like you live without a mirror? And I have no reason to look in it at my old age," she added sadly. That same evening, Alfonsina took Ana into the kitchen and told her not to hesitate to use everything she saw. On the first day, the girl went to look for a job. She graduated with honors from medical school, so she was immediately hired at one of the city hospitals. Working in the surgery department was not easy, and it took a long time to get to the hospital, but Ana was okay with that. She worked all her shifts and took extra work. The hard work and the way to the hospital and back took a lot of energy and time, leaving no room for thoughts of the past, despite the harsh schedule. Sometimes Ana liked to walk a couple of stops on foot. One day in the street darkness, she heard a soft cry or squeak. When she turned toward the sound of crying, she saw a small shaggy lump with shiny eyes. It was a very weak-looking puppy. Ana picked it up, not afraid to get dirty, and said, cuddling it, "Poor thing. Where did you come from? All right, don't flinch. Let's go. I will wash you, feed you, and then we will get to know each other." When Ana came with her new tenant, the landlady was overjoyed. "I'll feel so much happier while Ana is away at work," Alfonsina said as she took the puppy in her arms. When they washed the puppy, he turned out to be a real miracle, all black, only one ear and back leg were white. So they nicknamed him Bligro, from black and white. Most of the time they called him just Bleg. So now Ana was happily rushing home every day, where she was greeted by her faithful friend with a wagging tail. Alfonsina was happy to tell about his adventures of the day. It seemed that everything was fine. Ana no longer remembered the past and got used to the new life, but the conflict with the surgeon did not let her relax. She felt bitter to tears. She graduated from medical school with honors, and now she had to clean the floors in the hospital and listen to the reproaches of the angry Crispinchella. There was no choice because she needed money to live on, so Ana anxiously went to the hospital every day. Despite this, she tried to perform her duties perfectly, washing, cleaning, and scrubbing. The patients loved her very much, only now they felt sorry for her and told her, "How could this happen, Ana? We miss your golden hand so much. No one can do the injection better than you." But the girl answered, smiling sadly, "Well, maybe later things will get better, and I'll start giving you injections and IVs again." She really hoped that someday Crispinchella would change his anger for mercy and let her return to her previous duties. But nothing changed, and Ana continued to clean the ward every morning. Every day began with Crispinchella demanding that the VIP rooms should be perfectly cleaned. These were several rooms, separated from the rest of the ward with an archway of plants. Every VIP room had a small refrigerator and a TV set. An air conditioner worked in the summer, and the room could be optionally extra heated in the winter. There was also a humidifier, and even the menu was special, dietary, but exquisite and served right in the room. The attending physician of the patients in these rooms was Crispinchella himself. He spent most of his time here, fawning over each patient. Obviously, one day in this room cost almost as much as Ana's salary for a month, and often the relatives of the patients also handed the weighty bags with presents to Crispinchella. It seemed to Ana that he waited for this every time. Sometimes when he received a bag of gifts, he looked inside it and was disappointed. His attitude immediately changed. He said goodbye to the patients coldly and immediately left. Once she noticed a discharged patient after appendicitis surgery putting money in the surgeon's pocket, she quickly looked away and waited until they left before she went to clean up the room for the new patient. Immersed in her thoughts, Ana then changed the bed linens and wiped the dust off the furniture and window sills. And when she went to the little white nightstand, she saw a phone. It was very beautiful and obviously very expensive. The girl had only seen one of these on advertising posters or on the pages of magazines before. Her little old phone seemed like a toy from the last century. The phone she found had no single button, and the screen looked like a mirror. It was the first time Ana had held such an expensive device. She stared at this miracle of technology for a while, then gently touched the screen with her finger. The phone was not locked, and a beautiful picture popped up right away. Ana even flinched. She didn't know it was so easy to turn on a modern telephone. Confused, she did not know what to do next. Her first thought was to take it to Crispinchella, but she immediately changed her mind. Seeing him one more time today was too much for her. Every conversation with this tyrant had ended in scandal and groundless reproaches against her. La muchacha decidió no hacer que sus truenos y relámpagos sobre sí misma, sino esperar un poco. I will wait for a while. Maybe the owner of the phone will come back for it, Ana thought, and put the phone in her robe pocket. The girl hoped that someone would come for the phone, but the owner never showed up. In the evening, she went to the back room, locked the door, and began to examine the fancy technology. She decided to find contacts of relatives, mother, father, or anyone else. Ana didn't know if the patient had relatives, but wanted to find the number and inform them that she found the phone. The girl pressed the screen for a long time, which went off and on again and again. Suddenly old pictures began to pop up. Ana had no intention of prying into someone else's life and was about to turn the phone off, but there was a picture of her mother on the screen. She was smiling, just like in the picture above Ana's bed in Grandma's house, only her mother looked happy in the picture on the phone. Some man was hugging her, and they were definitely in love. Ana couldn't understand how an old picture of her mother had ended up in the patient's phone, and what they could possibly have in common after what had happened. She began to try even harder to find the relatives' contacts. When she saw the entry father in the phone book, she immediately dialed the number. She didn't know how to make a call from this phone, so she decided to call from her phone. A low, soft voice answered, and Ana began to talk timidly. "Excuse me, this is the nurse. Tartamudeando, Corriggio, the hospital cleaner. A patient forgot his phone, and your number is listed as father. That's why I decided to call you." The man listened to her, thanked and said he would try to come as soon as possible. Half an hour later, a tall, gray-haired man found Ana. The same patient who had forgotten his phone walked into the hospital ward with him. The men began to thank the girl and offered her money, but Ana flatly refused. When the guy tried to put bills in her pocket, just the way he gave money to the surgeon, Ana answered quietly, but sharply, "I won't take the money," and she added after a moment's silence, "But I would appreciate it if you could tell me why there is a picture of my mother in your phone." Seeing the surprise on the men's faces, Ana blushed and felt ashamed. She confessed that she was looking through what was in the phone, and as if trying to justify herself, she added, "I had to find some relatives to return this expensive toy." The young man's father was the first one to start the conversation. His name was Sergio Mossip, and his son was Tobias. The man said to Anna, smiling, "Sweet young lady, take a closer look. I have changed, but you can still recognize me in the photo." He held out his son's cell phone, and Anna realized that it was him in the picture, only very young, without the gray hair on his temples. "Yes, I was slimmer then, and my hair was thicker. Time doesn't make anyone prettier. And my beloved wife, Rosalia, is next to me in the picture. We lived happily together for a long time, and we are still together, waiting for grandchildren from this reveler." He playfully patted his son and added, "Here is the result of our love, our only son Tobias." He smiled and nodded toward his son. Anna did not understand anything. She thought it was a dream. She could not be mistaken. It was her mother. "That's my mother," the girl said timidly, "but she died long ago. I am sure of it. She died as soon as I was born, and I only know her from pictures. Let me prove it to you." The girl left and returned in a few minutes with a small faded picture. She handed it to the man. "Look, that's my mother, Ramona. I would be happy if she were alive, but she died years ago." Sergio took the picture from her hands and looked at it silently for a while. "Let me disprove the claim of death. This beautiful lady is alive and well, and you can see it for yourself." He offered to go with them to see the woman from the picture in person. They agreed that the very next day he would pick Anna up after work and she would visit them to meet the heroine of the picture in person. Anna was very nervous and did not understand why, but she could not refuse the meeting. She knew she would never get her mother back. But she hoped that by meeting her copy she would find the family she had lacked all these years. She prepared for this meeting very carefully. The landlady, upon learning of what had happened, helped her to choose the right outfit and even solemnly gave her a small butterfly-shaped brooch. "My beloved husband gave it to me, and it has always brought me good luck. Good luck to you, my dear girl." Alfonsina said, wiping away a tear, crossed herself, and went to her room. Anna chose a blouse and skirt very similar to the ones her mother wore in the picture. She always wanted to look like her. And looking at herself in the mirror that evening, it seemed to Anna that she was a reflection of her mother's picture. The girl really did look a lot like her mother. She worked all day long, thinking only of the coming meeting, and waited impatiently for the evening. At the appointed time, Sergio was already waiting for her at the entrance. "Good evening, Anna," he began, and when he saw her shyness, he smiled and continued, "Why are you so nervous? Everything is fine. And perhaps soon we will uncover some secret." Anna noticed that his voice was a little shaky. It was obvious that Sergio was nervous, too, but he tried to hide it. On the way they barely spoke, both of them were deep in their own thoughts. The house they arrived at surprised Anna with its size. A 3-story house with huge windows on the first floor could accommodate a lot of people. Anna couldn't believe that only 3 people lived in such a mansion. At first glance, she thought this house looked like 4 or even 5 of Grandmother Maria's houses. There was a beautiful lawn around the house, and the many flower beds showed that the owners really loved flowers. At this moment, Anna felt sorry that it was out of season and there would be no opportunity to enjoy the blossoms and fragrance of this beauty. The girl timidly got out of the car and was afraid to take a step on the neatly paved paths. She tried to see everything as best she could, but she was shy. But she saw that everything was in the right place and fitted in well with the overall view. "Why are you so bewildered? Don't be afraid, nobody bites here," Sergio said, taking Anna by the hand and heading toward the house. As they crossed the threshold, a woman who resembled Anna's mother like 2 drops of water, only slightly older, came out into the hall. She held out her hand to the girl and introduced herself. "Good afternoon, my name is Rosalia Mossip. My husband told me everything yesterday. Come in, don't be shy." The interior of the house was very beautiful, expensive, and perfect. Anna noticed that everything was somehow very cozy. The beautiful oak furniture in the living room matched perfectly with the antique restored sideboard. On the wall above the sofa was a gallery of portraits of different times, and in the kitchen, a beautiful painting. Noticing the girl's interest in the paintings, Sergio hugged his wife and said, "These are all my Rosalia's works. She finds joy in it and shares it with us." As they sat around the table looking at the family photo album, Ana couldn't understand how Rosalia couldn't have known about her sister. When they were having tea in the kitchen, the hostess, holding a photo of Anna's mother, spoke with great sadness. "I don't understand how this could happen. I have always lived with my parents and was the only very beloved daughter. They did everything to make sure I didn't need anything. Wait, let me show you a picture of my wedding with Sergio. They are so happy there," she said sadly, and quickly returned with a picture of the wedding with an elderly man and woman holding hands and smiling happily. Rosalia said quietly, "A year later Mommy passed away, and 2 more years later Daddy's heart stopped." That evening Rosalia and Sergio asked a lot of questions about the life of Ana and her mother. But what could she tell if she had never seen her? Only that she missed her mother's affection and care, that she wanted to cuddle up and tell about all her girlish troubles when she was a teenager. When Ana was about to go home, they already felt as if they were longtime and good friends. The hosts asked her not to disappear and to visit them sometimes. Sergio decided he had to get to the bottom of what had happened. The very next morning he arrived at the office. He was the owner of a big construction company and asked the head of security to find out all the details about the birth of the twins Rosalia and Ramona. A couple of days later, everything was revealed. Many years ago, their biological parents had abandoned the girls in the hospital. Shortly after they were born, their mother signed a statement, disappeared, and no one ever saw her again. The girls were taken to an orphanage, and soon the beautiful and perfectly healthy infants were adopted. But it so happened that they were adopted by different families. At first, Anna's mother was adopted by grandmother Maria, who was then still a young and full of energy woman, but very lonely. A few years before that she had lost her husband. He died rapidly of a serious illness. She also had a son, but he died in a car accident. So she was left alone, and her neighbor suggested her, "Maria, go to the nearby town. There's an orphanage there. Think about it, maybe you'll want to adopt a child. It's hard to live without taking care of your loved ones." She hesitated, postponing the trip several times, but made up her mind, and when she arrived, she immediately fell in love with the little girl with brown eyes. She knew for sure she was going to adopt that girl. But when it turned out that she had a sister, things got complicated. The director of the orphanage persuaded her to adopt both of them, explaining that it was not right to do otherwise. "You can't separate sisters," everyone kept saying, even the nannies. The woman realized that she couldn't afford to raise 2 girls in a remote village. She didn't have enough money. But luckily for her, it turned out that a young couple from another town wanted to adopt a second baby. And so it turned out that Ramona, Anna's mother, grew up in a small village with her mother Maria and the second sister of Rosalia in a city hundreds of kilometers away in a well-to-do family. Ramona got all her outfits mostly from her neighbors. And Rosalia's father brought her clothes from abroad, where he was often on business trips. But none of the sisters, even though there was a blood relative somewhere. As soon as Rosalia learned all the details about her sister, she asked Ana to go with her to the cemetery. The next weekend Sergio took them to the village where Ana was born and had lived for some time. At the cemetery, they did not immediately find Ramona's grave. But when they found it, they cried in silence for a long time, and then Rosalia said quietly, "I am sorry, little sister, that I didn't find you sooner. I didn't know." She turned to her husband and added, "Sergio, we need to place here a monument, and I will plant beautiful flowers here." Soon the grave became modest but tidy, and there were always many beautiful flowers. From the day everyone learned the sister's secret, Ana was treated by the family as a family member. The Mossip family tried to help and support her in every way. They insisted that Ana should not return to the remote village, but stay in the city. Her aunt, who was now the girl's real family, took care of her in every way. She helped her rent a small but clean and comfortable apartment in a good neighborhood. The landlady, Rosalia's friend, moved to another region for work for a whole year and gladly allowed her to live in her apartment. She had only to pay the utility bills and take care of the houseplants. Everything was going great, but there was still one problem. Ana was still cleaning floors instead of doing what she loved, helping people. When Sergio found out that Ana was the best student at medical school, he asked in surprise, "Is the only thing they teach there to do is change diapers and mop the floors?" Ana couldn't stand it and told Sergio everything. When he found out about the conflict with the surgeon and that he was taking bribes, he quickly solved the problem. It turned out that his longtime friend worked in the Ministry of Health, and after learning about what was happening in the surgical department of the city hospital, he initiated an inspection. It went quickly and effectively, and as a result, Crispincello was fired, and he was not the only one. It turned out that a couple of other doctors and the head nurse of the department were involved in everything that was going on. They can never work in the medical field again. And the new head of the department reviewed the files of the staff and was shocked that such a competent professional was cleaning the windows and floors. He immediately appointed Ana to the position of head nurse. When he announced this news to the entire ward staff, there was a pause for a moment. Lilia glanced angrily at Ana. She wanted to get this position herself. The status and good salary had always attracted the girl. But Lilia didn't have the necessary skills and experience. After a minute, there was timid applause. Since that day, the attitude toward Ana in the surgical department had changed greatly, as had the girl's mood. Now she was happily rushing to work in the morning, and even the guard at the entrance accepted the fact that she was the first to arrive and the last to leave. She was ready to spend 24 hours a day at the hospital for the sake of the work she loved. The patients were very happy for Ana. But their only regret was that now she rarely gave injections and IVs. And if someone needed surgery, patients begged the doctor to let her assist the doctor. This often happened because the new head doctor predicted a great future for the girl. Ana realized this, too. She became really irreplaceable in the surgical department. She had time to perform the duties of a head nurse and to help the junior medical staff. One day the nurse on duty was late in the morning, so Ana went to patients herself. There was a new patient in the post-surgical room. An emergency surgery had been performed during the night on a man in his 50s. Blood samples had to be taken, and Ana did everything perfectly, as always. It turned out that the patient needed donor blood, and it was urgent. His blood type was very rare, and his Rh factor was negative. The department was out of the necessary blood. Ana carefully examined the patient's medical records and was surprised to find that she had exactly the same blood type and the same Rh factor. Ana was well aware that such coincidences are rare and clearly indicate kinship, but the girl thought about the patient's life first. She immediately went to the chief physician. "Antonio Pena, patient Suarez in room 26 needs blood. The transfusion station won't bring it until the afternoon, and I have exactly the same blood type. I'm ready to donate." The head doctor looked at the girl in surprise, but he trusted her. The young nurse always made the right decisions. Nodding in agreement, he immersed himself again in the review of the patient's medical records. The blood transfusion was not easy for Ana. Perhaps it was because of her nervousness and anxiety. The girl almost fainted, and her colleagues could hardly bring her back to her senses. But all in all, everything went well, and after a few days, the patient felt much better. One morning, Antonio Pena, standing at this patient's bedside, said, "Everything went very well. We have to thank our head nurse, Ana. Although I advise you to think about it, such a coincidence of a rare blood type usually indicates relative genes. I advise you to do a DNA test." The head doctor winked at the patient and left the room, leaving him thoughtful. Cesario Suarez, who underwent surgery a few days ago, was very puzzled, but without waiting to be discharged, he decided to do a DNA test. He had rehearsed the conversation with his savior several times, but didn't know how best to begin it. But he finally made up his mind. As soon as the girl entered the room, she heard the voice of a patient who had been silent for so long she wanted to talk to him, but the man was ahead of her. "Thank you very much," the patient began timidly. "If it were not for you, I do not know if I would be alive." The doctor said that a blood match indicates the possibility of kinship. "Where are you from? Who are your parents?" At that moment, something tightened in Anna's soul. She was afraid to think that it was her father, but deep in her heart, she believed in a miracle. When the nurse began to tell the story of her life, where she lived and with whom, about her mother, everything she knew from Maria's stories, she saw in Cesario's eyes that a miracle was possible. She realized that she had finally found her father. But they decided to make it official. After taking the DNA test, they eagerly awaited the result, and when they finally got it, they embraced, sat in silence, and cried for a long time. Her father told Ana how he and Ramona met, how much they loved each other, and that they were going to get married. But he and her mother were young and foolish. They broke up over some nonsense, saying a lot of silly things to each other. And he had no idea she was pregnant. He joined the army right away, and after that, he stayed in the city. He tried to find her a couple of times. Ramona hid the fact that she was from a remote village, pretending to be from the city, and he sincerely believed that she lived in the same city. He looked for her in the neighborhood where they lived, but no one knew where the girl had gone. They sat in silence in the hospital room for a couple of hours, holding hands, unable to believe what had happened. The father cried, stroked Anna's hair, and whispered, "Forgive me, my daughter, for heaven's sake, forgive me. I have no family, no children. I thought I would die alone. I lived with my wife for 20 years. God never gave me any children, and he took my wife to heaven. She died 2 years ago. And now I'm so happy I have a daughter." He could not believe what had happened. That evening they sat hand in hand for a long time and talked about their lives. Ana finally could rest her head against her father's chest and talk about all the troubles, sorrows, and joys, as in childhood dreams. The local newspaper found out about the happy meeting of father and daughter, and within a couple of days, the story of their life was on the front page. The front page had a picture of a smiling Ana hugging her father. After Cesario was discharged from the hospital, he insisted that his daughter should move in with him. "Why do you need to rent an apartment and pay for that? I live alone in a big house. There is enough space for 2 people, he told Ana. "Move in with me, it's more fun together. I'm at work every day, just like you, but we can spend evenings together, talking and drinking tea." Ana felt a little uncomfortable. She didn't want to disturb him, but her father insisted. She and Bligro moved into her father's house and was happy to learn new things about his life and to tell him about herself. Her father really had a very big house almost in the center of the city, a big hallway, a kitchen, a dining room with a huge round table, and 3 bedrooms. When Ana first walked into the house and looked around, her father said sadly, "We inherited this house from my wife's grandmother. Actually, we could have sold it and bought something smaller, but my wife and I hoped that we would have a large family, no less than 5 children and many grandchildren. We even kept a big dining room table." He stopped talking abruptly and never mentioned it again. Ana realized that for him it was like an open wound. The girl settled in one of the rooms. The room was very comfortable and bright. A large window looked out on the sunny side and the park, so the room never looked cloudy. All the furniture was in the same light tone, making the room even more sunny. A beautiful carved bed, a nightstand, a neat table with a mirror and an ottoman, and a closet with a gilded line. Everything was so light and airy. It was as if the room had been deliberately prepared for a girl, a daughter. Ana was too shy to ask her father for whom this room was intended, but the aura in the room was very good and Ana liked the place immediately. After moving in, her father suggested inviting her aunt's family. He already knew about the relatives from his daughter's stories and wanted to meet them. After all, he and Ana were lonely people who had miraculously found each other, and he was happy to meet his new relatives. On Sunday, they set the table together and had a nice family dinner with Rosalia and Sergio, who arrived with a big cake. Tobias stopped by for a few minutes to meet Anna's father and ran off with apologies, whispering one last word to his cousin. "I'll introduce you to her, I promise, but for now, I'm sorry." Ana felt that she was the happiest person in the world. She is not alone anymore. She has an aunt, a cousin, and a father. Now her biggest dream was to become a doctor, but she already had a job she loved. She often called her relatives, and they visited each other on weekends. And she and her cousin became best friends and saw each other almost every day. She worked near his office, and he could show up at lunchtime or after work to invite her to a nearby pastry shop for coffee and a favorite dessert. Ana was not surprised when her cousin invited her to the cafe again and promised to be there in half an hour. She tried to finish her work quickly, and when she walked into the cafe, she was surprised. Her cousin was not alone. There was a spectacular long-haired blonde and a young man sitting next to him. Ana had goosebumps running down her spine when she looked at this handsome guy. The brother stood up. "Meet my found cousin Ana, now my one and only beloved cousin." He took Ana by the hand and walked her toward the girl at the table and continued in the same tone. "And this is the love of my life, Catalina. I hope she will be my wife soon." He winked, nodded toward the handsome man at the table, and said, "And this is my faithful and devoted friend Maximo. He is single and has no children, please note." Ana blushed like a tomato. She couldn't get used to Tobias' jokes, was afraid to look up at Maximo, and just held out her hand silently. The black eyes under a fan of long lashes looked as if drawn by a good artist, and the curly short hair added even more charm. When Maximo smiled and said he was very pleased to meet her, Ana realized she had fallen in love. At first, she felt uncomfortable in this company. It was obvious that they had known each other for a long time and they had much in common and had a lot to remember, but after half an hour she completely forgot that she hardly knew the guys. Communication was easy and relaxed. The guys were always joking, and she and Catalina just laughed gleefully, asking them to stop. When it was time to say goodbye, Maximo asked to walk Ana home, and naturally, she couldn't resist. They decided to walk, leaving Maximo's car outside the hospital. They walked for a long time through the beautifully lit streets. Maximo turned out to be a very kind and simple guy. He worked for Sergio Massip's construction company. He and Ana had much in common. They read the same books, watched the same movies, and even liked the same weather, the time of year, and cartoons. That night they both didn't want to part, but it was already midnight, and they agreed to meet the next day. At night Ana went to bed smiling happily. Ana didn't remember the bitter love experience of the past anymore, but only waited for the next day to come soon. Ana wanted to see Maximo again and talk about anything. She just wanted to be with him. They began to see each other every day, and a week later Maximo came to pick her up from work with a huge bouquet of beautiful flowers. "Ana, please listen to me. I could only dream of someone like you. I knew right away that this was the kind of wife I wanted to have by my side. Marry me. Maybe it's silly to hear this after a week of knowing you, but I love you." The girl was shocked, because they had known each other only a few days, and she did not even think about what would happen next, but suddenly she realized that she was afraid of losing him and decided come what may. Unexpectedly to herself, she suddenly said, "Maximo, I agree." That same evening he took her home to introduce her to his mother. The boy's father died at a construction site a long time ago, when the boy was not yet 3 years old, and his mother raised him alone. Elena turned out to be a very nice woman of short stature with kind eyes. When she saw that Ana was very nervous, she immediately said, "Ana, don't worry, I won't eat you. Moreover, now my son will always protect you and will not let anyone hurt you." Walking the girl into the living room, she said that her son constantly talked about his Ana. Elena confessed that she forced him to bring Ana here. As they were having tea with Elena's favorite cake, Maximo said, "Mom, I proposed to Ana today." She said yes. "Let's go to her father soon, I'll ask his permission." The woman, holding back tears, walked up to the girl, hugged her, and said, "I am very happy for you. I am very happy that my son will have such a wonderful wife. I hope your father will not mind your marriage." The next weekend Ana nervously set the table. Her father helped by setting up the chairs and dishes. Ana invited everyone to the dinner party: Rosalia, Sergio, and Tobias. Ana's nervousness quickly faded. Everyone seemed to have known each other for a long time. At the table, they actively discussed how and where they would celebrate the wedding, what kind of champagne they would drink, and how to organize everything. It was as if they had already decided everything for the young couple without even asking them. Maximo only cheerfully tried to interrupt. "Maybe you could ask Ana and me?" To which Sergio replied with a wink. "Your only task is to love each other and kiss each other at the wedding, so go ahead and practice. And we'll help you organize the wedding." Time went by. They decided to set up that big table in the living room of her father's house for their wedding anniversary. Everyone came except Ana herself. Coincidentally, this was the moment when everyone could not sit down at the table until they heard the news from the maternity hospital. Earlier that morning, Ana had gone into labor and Maximo took her to the hospital. And now the table was set with the most exquisite dishes, but everyone was waiting. Only Sergio and Cesario escaped to the kitchen for a moment and quietly drank to Ana's health. Maximo's phone rang with triple force. After listening to the speaker, he happily threw the phone on the couch, hugged his mother, and shouted, "Mom, congratulations on your new position. You're a double grandmother now, and I have 2 daughters. I'm the luckiest father." Something incredible started happening in the house. Everyone was hugging, kissing, and congratulating each other. That night they drank not only to the happiness of the young couple, but also to the health of mommy and daughters. But instead of a festive fireworks show, the news sounded at the table. Tobias and Catalina decided to get married, too. But there was another surprise for everyone present. Ana's father stood up and said, "That's it, it's time. I want this date to be a memorable one for all of us. We are now grandparents and have the right to say whatever we think. Elena, marry me. Let everything be right for everyone." Elena was confused, but to the applause, she could not refuse and kissed her fiancé.
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe.